door to the basement was never meant to be opened. Not because it was locked, not because it was hidden, but because every family that lived in that house somehow understood, without ever saying it out loud, that whatever waited below did not want to be seen. In 1875, in rural Virginia, the Carter family ignored that instinct, and within weeks, every single one of them vanished. No bodies were ever found. No screams were officially recorded. No crime scene was declared. Just an open basement door and a house that never felt empty again. Before we go any further, if stories buried in forgotten places fascinate you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Night Archives. It helps keep these hidden histories alive, and it ensures you never miss the next story that time tried to erase. The Carter family were not strangers to hardship. Like many families after the Civil War, they were rebuilding a life from what little remained. Thomas Carter was a carpenter by trade, quiet and methodical. His wife, Eleanor, was known in the nearby town as polite, reserved, and deeply religious. They had 3 children, Samuel, age 12, Ruth, age 9, and the youngest, Clara, only 5. The farmhouse they purchased sat at the edge of dense woodland, far from neighbors, far from town noise. It was cheap, and that alone should have raised questions. But in 1875, cheap land meant opportunity. The house was old even then. Built decades earlier, possibly before the war, possibly before records were carefully kept. Locals avoided the property, but when asked why, their answers were always vague. Bad air, some said. Unstable foundation, others claimed. A few simply shook their heads and changed the subject. What everyone avoided mentioning was the basement. It wasn't sealed. It wasn't hidden. The door sat just off the kitchen, made of thick, dark wood, slightly warped, with iron hinges that groaned even when untouched. According to Eleanor's later letters, found years after the disappearance, the children were told from the first day never to go near it. Not because it was dangerous, but because it made the house feel wrong. For the first few weeks, life continued quietly. Thomas repaired fences. Eleanor tended a small garden. The children explored the woods, but always returned before sunset, uneasy about staying out too long. Then the sounds began. At first, it was just at night, a dull shifting noise beneath the floorboards, like furniture being dragged slowly across dirt. Thomas dismissed it as settling earth. Old houses made noise, especially ones with basements dug directly into soil. But the sounds didn't stop. They grew more deliberate. Ruth was the first to speak about it. One evening, she asked her mother why someone was walking under the kitchen after dark. Eleanor reportedly laughed it off, telling her it was rats or pipes. But later that night, Eleanor wrote in her journal that she, too, heard footsteps, slow, measured, pacing directly below where the family slept. No footsteps ever reached the stairs. They stayed below. The children began refusing to sleep alone. Clara cried whenever the house fell silent, covering her ears as if listening too closely hurt. Samuel claimed he heard whispering, though he could never repeat what was said. Thomas tried to investigate once. He opened the basement door during daylight, standing at the top of the steps with a lantern in hand. According to his notes, the air that rose from below was cold, unnaturally cold for late summer. The steps descended farther than expected, disappearing into darkness that the lantern barely touched. He did not go down. He closed the door and nailed a wooden plank across it that same afternoon. That should have been the end of it. Instead, the knocking began. Not loud, not violent. 3 slow taps, always from beneath the floor, always at night. Alina described it as patient, as if whatever was below knew it would eventually be answered. By October, the family had stopped attending church. Neighbors noticed Thomas looked exhausted, his hands shaking when he spoke. Alina avoided conversation altogether. When asked if they planned to leave, she only said, "It won't let us." On the night of October 17th, a storm rolled through the region. Heavy rain, thunder close enough to shake windows. That was the night the basement door was opened again. No one knows who opened it. The plank was found split cleanly down the middle, as if forced from the inside. By morning, the house was silent. When neighbors came to check on the family days later, they found the front door unlocked. The table was set for breakfast. A pot sat cold on the stove. 3 pairs of children's shoes were lined neatly near the wall. The basement door stood open. The stairs descended into complete darkness. The Carter family was never seen again. Authorities searched the woods. They searched the house. They searched the basement as far as their lantern light allowed. The earth below showed no signs of collapse, no tunnels, no remains. Yet every officer reported the same sensation, the feeling of being watched from below. The house was eventually abandoned. Over time, it rotted into the land. But locals say that even decades later, the basement door, though buried, though broke, was never fully closed. And some doors, once opened, never truly are. If this story is getting under your skin, you're not alone. And this is only the beginning. Years passed, but the story of the Carter family refused to fade. In nearby towns, people stopped referring to the property by name. It became that house. Children were warned not to wander near it. Hunters avoided the woods surrounding it, claiming their compasses behaved strangely, and their dogs refused to move closer. Once the foundation came into view, what truly unsettled people wasn't just that the family disappeared. It was that the house didn't behave like an abandoned place. In the months following the disappearance, neighbors reported seeing lights flicker through the farmhouse windows at night. soft yellow glows, moving from room to room, stopping briefly near the kitchen, always near where the basement door had been. No one lived there. At least, no one officially. One former deputy, Henry Wallace, wrote years later that he returned to the house alone in 1881, driven by guilt and curiosity. He claimed the case was never properly closed, that something about it felt unfinished. He entered through the front door just before sunset. Inside, dust covered everything, but footprints marked the floor. Small ones, barefoot, they led toward the kitchen. The basement door was closed. Henry stated that the air inside the house felt compressed, heavy, like breathing underwater. As he approached the basement door, he heard something shift beneath it, not moving away, not approaching, just repositioning itself. Then came the voice, not loud, not threatening, a woman's voice. It spoke his name. Henry ran. He never returned to law enforcement, never spoke publicly again. He died 10 years later, reportedly in his sleep, though his family insisted he was found sitting upright, eyes open, as if listening to something no one else could hear. After that, the house was sealed, boards nailed across windows, the front door chained shut. But sealing a structure does not seal what lives beneath it. In 1894, a traveling survey team attempted to map the land for future development. Their notes mention the basement explicitly. They recorded that measurements taken inside the house did not align with external dimensions. The basement was larger than the house above it, by several feet. No additional rooms were visible. No hidden extensions were found. Yet when measured repeatedly, the numbers remained the same. One surveyor refused to sign his report. He claimed the walls breathed. The basement itself became the subject of whispered theories. Some believed it had once been used as a makeshift holding area during the war. Others claimed the land predated settlement entirely, tied to something older, something that didn't belong to any family. What remained consistent were the sounds: scraping, footsteps, and the knocking. Always 3 slow taps. In 1907, a young couple attempted to purchase the land, believing the stories were exaggerated folklore. They planned to demolish the house entirely. On their first night camping nearby, they heard children laughing beneath the soil. They left before dawn. By the early 20th century, the farmhouse collapsed in on itself. Walls fell. The roof caved. But the basement remained intact, a dark cavity beneath the wreckage, partially exposed, yet never filled. Locals say snow never settled evenly above it. Rainwater drained away unnaturally fast. Plants refused to grow in a perfect circle around the opening. And then, in 1932, a discovery reignited everything. A box was found buried near the old foundation. Inside were Alina Carter's journals, somehow preserved, untouched by moisture or decay. The final entries were fragmented, frantic, written in uneven strokes. She described dreams that felt shared, dreams where the basement was no longer beneath the house, but inside it, stretching endlessly, filled with rooms that rearranged themselves. She wrote that the children spoke to someone at night, someone who sounded like her. The final entry ended abruptly. The door knows our names. It knows we belong to it. Thomas says we must leave, but it says we already did. No further writing followed. These journals were quietly archived and then quietly forgotten. The box vanished during a relocation of records in the 1950s. Only copies remain. Night archives came across these copies buried deep in regional documentation, misfiled, unlabeled, and incomplete. And even now, some pages appear altered, as if rewritten after the fact. What happened to the Carter family may never be officially explained, but the pattern remains. The basement was not a place, it was a threshold, and thresholds exist to be crossed, eventually. Time has a way of burying places like this, but it never truly erases them. The land where the Carter farmhouse once stood was officially declared unusable by the state in the early 1960s. Soil instability was listed as the reason. No one questioned it. No one wanted to. For decades, the site remained untouched. Trees grew back unevenly. Wildlife avoided the area. Even birds rarely nested there. Locals said the woods felt quieter around that patch of land, like sound itself didn't travel properly. Then, in 1989, something changed. A group of college students from Richmond, studying local folklore, decided to camp near the ruins. They didn't believe the stories. They brought cameras, notebooks, and recording equipment, convinced they would document nothing more than an eerie night and some exaggerated legends. Only 2 of them returned. According to their statements, sometime after midnight, they heard knocking from underground. 3 slow taps. One of the students joked about it at first, until the knocking began answering their voices. Every time they spoke, it tapped back. When they shined their flashlights toward the old foundation, they saw an opening where the basement once was, larger than expected, deeper than light should reach. One student claimed to hear a child crying, calling for her mother. Another said the voice sounded like herself. Panic set in. 2 ran. The others stayed, frozen, staring downward as if something below had begun to move upward. Search efforts found no trace of the missing students. No footprints leading away. No signs of struggle. Just abandoned equipment and a recording tape that ended abruptly with a soft female voice whispering, "You came back." Authorities sealed the area permanently after that incident. Concrete was poured. Warning signs were posted. The land was fenced and forgotten once more. But disappearance does not always mean absence. In recent years, Satellite imaging shows subtle irregularities beneath the ground, voids that do not align with natural formations. The state refuses to comment. Access to the area is restricted, and yet hikers still report hearing sounds beneath their feet when they stray too close. Knocking, footsteps, and sometimes voices that sound familiar. What makes the Carter case so unsettling isn't just that a family vanished without explanation. It's that nothing replaced them. No remains, no closure, just the sense that they didn't leave the house. They moved deeper into it. Some historians believe the basement acted as a kind of echo, something that learned voices, learned shapes, learned how to call people by name. Others think the land itself predates human settlement, feeding on presence, expanding when acknowledged. But maybe the simplest explanation is the most disturbing. Maybe the basement was never empty. Maybe it was waiting for a family desperate enough to ignore instinct, waiting for footsteps above it, waiting for a door to finally open. And once it did, it never needed to open it again. If you're listening to this late at night and you feel a sudden urge to check the rooms beneath your feet, you're not alone. Stories like this stay with us because they remind us that not every mystery wants to be solved. Some just want to be remembered. If this story left you unsettled, let us know in the comments what you think really happened to the Carter family. Do you believe the basement was a place or something alive? And if you know someone who loves dark, forgotten history, share this story with them. This has been Night Archives, where the past never stays buried.